We now move on to an economic update on Mozambique. The country voted in largely peaceful municipal elections on Wednesday amid tension and sporadic violence in the past months between the government and the main opposition group. Now, for more on this and an update on recent economic happenings in the country, joined on the phone by Colin Waugh. He's the partner at SCP Africa. Colin, it's great to have you on the show. Let's talk on the much anticipated municipal elections. What lies ahead and what does this mean for investors showing concern about stability of the environment?
Yes, good morning. It's been a pretty interesting 48 hours. The election results are still coming in, but most of the big cities, the big municipalities, have already given clear indications which way they're going. There's been a really big transformation, really, in the opposition alignment from the former main opposition party, Renamo, who still holds the second highest number of seats in the parliament, to the new Movement for Democratic Mozambique, MDM, who have boosted their showing right across the country quite dramatically, although they've only so far won 2 cities with a possibility of winning a third. So it's a big change in the Mozambican landscape, and I think it means there'll be an exciting presidential election this time next year.
Absolutely, we definitely look forward to that. Now let's move on to the country's controversial $850 million bond issue. Now we hear that 200 million euro will be used to pay for tuna boats and patrol vessels, but there's very little information on what the rest of the loan will be used for. So is this non-disclosure of information in loan documentation considered normal practice in Mozambique?
Well, yeah, it's when you say normal practice in Eurobonds, for example, or normal practice in other African countries that have had sovereign issues, then the answer would certainly be no. Normal practice in Mozambique is pretty hard to gauge because this is really the first time such an issue has ever come from Mozambique. So there's no doubt that the amount of documentation and the almost total secrecy with which the loan was generated, at least with regard to outside partners, it's quite unusual and quite irregular. It's also a very large size of loan, something like 6% of the country's GDP has just been borrowed in a very short time for a very unknown and very new agency.
Now, Colin, profits from some of these mega projects in Mozambique seem to be confined to a relatively tight-knit group of companies, the majority of whom have links to the state. So what does this mean for the country's SME class?
Yeah, this is really one of the big challenges now for the economy as these mega projects start to come on stream over the next 5 to 10 years. The rest of the country, which really depends on the small and medium-sized businesses for its growth and for its employment generation, is still lagging quite far behind, and the imbalances look as if they're likely to grow rather than diminish. We've had, just in the last few weeks, the release of the World Bank's doing business reports, which show Mozambique has improved very slightly from 142nd position to 139th position in the world. Not really all that encouraging an indicator. And at the same time, a lot of the obstacles which small businesses have often cited in the past, such as high interest rates for access to credit, ease of obtaining electricity outside the major cities, and so forth. The regulatory environment, taxes, and these types of obstacles really haven't improved to any strong degree. So there's a worry that the imbalance tends to favor the foreign corporations, and that imbalance may grow while the very high unemployment in the economy cannot be addressed through the growth of small businesses.
Now, Colin, there's a lot of development coming up in the country. I mean, we know that there's a liquefied natural gas plant targets to start production in 2018. There's also a railway line coming up. And also we know that there's a target for coal output for 2020. But most of these plans are, very much long term. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on revenue generation in the short term.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very unpredictable flow of revenue generation from the state's point of view. So far, they've had quite a good year with their share of the capital gains taxes that they've made on these concessions that were originally explored in some cases 7 to 10 years ago and are now being resold. So some of the exploration companies, for example, Anadarko, has managed to sell 10 or up to 20% of their original discoveries, which are now very, very much more valuable. And the state has, of course, reaped its share of these gains. In fact, over the last year and a half or so, it's an estimated nearly $1 billion has been gained by the country just through capital gains taxes. However, these are one-off flows, and when the capital gains inflows end, there will really not be much for perhaps another 5 to 7 years when the actual royalties from the flow of gas start to come in.